we have a problem.
New overnight, a Russian
attack by a Russian drone
over the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
On February 14th, Russia flew a kamikaze drone into Chernobyl. Yes, that Chernobyl, the nuclear power plant that was the site of the worst radioactive accident in the history of humanity. Now, there's a hole through the protective shell or sarcophagus that guards Chernobyl big enough to drop an SUV through. We're here to tell you why this is a way bigger deal than you may have thought, and what Russia's game is.
Добрый вечер, товарищи. Все вы знаете, недавно нас постигла беда. Авария на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции.
Chernobyl is one of the few pieces of Ukrainian history that nearly everyone in the world has heard of. At the time of the accident in 1986, only 5% of the radioactive reactor core was scattered into the environment. That was enough to leave 1,000 square miles surrounding the Chernobyl power plant uninhabitable to the present day. It's an area known as the exclusion zone. The explosion at Chernobyl released 400 times more radiation than the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima during World War II. Contents: mostly uranium, plutonium, and the resulting molten mess termed corium. The reactor melted down exactly 39 years ago tonight at 1:23 in the morning. Since then, over 200 tons of radioactive material have remained within the new safe confinement, the official name of the sarcophagus shielding the destroyed plant. To understand the situation caused by Russia's drone strike on Chernobyl, let's talk about what this sarcophagus is and how it works. So first, why did we need any type of confinement? And by that I mean, what exactly is it confining? Radiation is commonly depicted in pop culture as a glowing light. That kind of radiation, electromagnetic radiation, is fairly common, and much of it is benign. In addition to visible light, electromagnetic radiation includes radio and microwaves, X-rays, and also highly dangerous gamma rays, all of which erupted from Chernobyl. But this was not the most dangerous radiation that the Chernobyl meltdown released. Think of pollen, which trees release and the wind picks up and carries it everywhere, to other trees and flowers, but also onto your skin and, as anyone with allergies knows, up your nose. Now multiply that by about 1,000,000 times. That's particle radiation. That was the main threat of Chernobyl. 4 tons of radioactive dust is still sitting inside the destroyed nuclear reactor under the sarcophagus, along with a mountain of other nuclear nastiness. Soviet authorities scrambled to construct an enclosure in just 7 months. The original goal was and remains to keep these radioactive particles and dust under lock and key, rather than let them float off with the wind or seep into the surface or groundwater. They tried to limit contamination. Nobody, however, bothered to weld the enclosure shut or bolt its joints together, leaving rainwater free to creep in through the unsealed roof. In short, it was a band-aid over a bullet wound, but that was the idea. It was designed to last 20 or 30 years, but it corroded quickly, becoming hazardously unstable. In fact, the enclosure had to be stabilized with external scaffolding in 2008 to prevent a collapse. So they needed a new solution, something that had never been done before. But first, the Kyiv Independent is entirely member-funded, and it's your support that allows us to tell stories like this one. Become our member by following a link in the description below. Now back to the story. The new safe confinement, the official name for the new sarcophagus, was a momentous achievement. Until we looked at the actual measurements, we didn't truly appreciate its scale. It had to be large enough to enclose a 30-story building. That's like building a studio apartment for the Statue of Liberty, all the while trying to avoid collapsing the existing unstable structure beneath or exposing people working on the enclosure to dangerous levels of radiation. The sarcophagus cost nearly $2 billion and took almost a decade to complete. It was designed to last 100 years and withstand the most extreme temperatures and dangerous natural disasters, from earthquakes to tornadoes. What they didn't plan for was a war. In February this year, Russia did something mind-boggling. And now, this relatively new $2 billion sarcophagus, a protective shield between humanity and the worst nuclear disaster in human history, is no longer doing what it was designed to do.
Ніхто й не думав, що взагалі ми опинимося в ситуації, коли буде атакована
Чорнобильська атомна станція, коли буде атакована новий безпечний конфайнмент. Для нас, звичайно, ми всі в умовах війни, може бути атакований будь-який об'єкт, але це вже верх цинізму і безвідповідальності був з боку росіян.
When Russia blasted through the nearly 40-foot double walls of the new safe confinement, it short-circuited two critical functions in addition to opening a gaping hole. Contrary to what you might think, the new safe confinement is not hermetically sealed. It's not an airtight jar keeping everything in. How it works is that a specially designed ventilation system maintains a lower atmospheric pressure inside, about 5 to 8 pascals lower than the exterior, to be precise. Even if you skipped class in high school, we all have a basic understanding that airflow moves from high to low pressure. You poke a small hole in a balloon, the air leaks out. So, lower pressure inside the confinement pulls air inside rather than letting it outside. To do that, you need to have a controlled environment, something you can't really do with a hole in the side. That's the first problem. The second is related to the arch's design. The strike on Chernobyl set off a chain reaction you likely didn't see on the news. You see, between the double walls of the confinement runs a layer of waterproof insulation. The insulation stopped moisture from corroding inside the sarcophagus. But once struck by a Russian drone, the insulation caught fire, which spread on the north and partially the south side of the confinement. It took emergency workers almost 3 weeks to put out the fire. And in that process, they had to punch new holes into the sarcophagus to find the fire at different points in a game of radioactive whack-a-mole.
З 14 лютого по 3 березня в нас ще виникали об'єкти горіння, тління, і всього десь 200 отворів було зроблено під час гасіння загальною площею 50 метрів квадратних.
The $2 billion project was intended to be a once-in-a-century endeavor. So what happens now?
У нас ціль відновити на 100%. Ми повинні повернути герметичність об'єкту, ми повинні повернути всі функції, які від самого початку були закладені в даний об'єкт.
As summer approaches, Ukraine will enter a rainy season. Temperatures will rise. Neither will help stave off corrosion.
Що стосується термінів взагалі по відновленню функціональності арки, то тут зараз важко сказати.
Another option would be to move the confinement away from the reactor. The 36,000-ton structure was essentially built on train tracks, so it's theoretically possible, but engineers are still figuring it out. In any case, it would be extremely risky to move the confinement due to the current condition of Chernobyl. So we're in a predicament, and it makes us wonder, what was the point of the attack? Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has rattled the nuclear saber to sideline the world from intervening more directly on behalf of Ukraine. They shelled the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, as they captured it in 2022. Russian airstrikes have at various points also narrowly missed the South Ukraine and the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plants. Not to mention, Russia has the world's largest nuclear arsenal, which Russian officials love bringing up in public statements. Threatening nuclear apocalypse appears to be central to Russia's foreign policy doctrine. Russia has denied each of these attacks, either in whole or in part, but intentionally attacking a nuclear power plant is a war crime, as enshrined in the Geneva Convention. But, for argument's sake, perhaps Russia didn't intend to strike Chernobyl. The Gerin 2 kamikaze drone used in the attack can be accurate to within about 200 meters. The chances of hitting that one particular object within a 1,000 square mile exclusion zone by accident are quite low. Russia frequently launches its Gerin 2 drones over Chernobyl, and yet, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov denied Russia's involvement, calling it a fabrication and provocation from Kyiv. The Russian military does not do this. So, even if it was an accident, Russia still routinely and brazenly and ignorantly plays with fire, and lies about it when it does. And this is not new for Russia. Here are declassified KGB documents telling state secrets concerning the Chernobyl accident. 1. The true reason of the accident. 2. Amount of damage. 3. The amount and type of discharge from the meltdown. 7. Information about the scale of contamination. 15. The mass poisoning and diseases. It goes on and on. That was from July 28th 1986, 3 months after the worst nuclear disaster in history. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was silent about the accident for 18 days. When he finally emerged on Soviet television, he spoke about Chernobyl passively while using the same timeless whataboutism we hear from the Kremlin today.
Нельзя оставить без внимания